Before dawn, on April 19, 1775, this quiet patch of earth held its breath. Today, we call it Lexington Green, and it's here that the story of Minuteman National Historical Park truly begins. The British column was still miles away when Captain Parker's militia gathered in the half-light. Men who had promised to be ready in a minute, now waiting in a cold silence, thick with fear, courage, and resolve. None of them knew their world was about to change, only that they were standing their ground for home. What happened here would echo to Concord, along the battle road, and across a new nation that had not yet been born. This is where ordinary people became the first defenders of an extraordinary idea. On Lexington Green stands the monument to the first men who fell on April 19, 1775. It marks the place where local militia faced the King's troops in the earliest moments of the Revolution. Today it feels peaceful, but this ground once shook with confusion, shouted orders, and the first shots that changed everything. This statue honors the Lexington militiamen who stood ready at a moment's notice. Farmers, craftsmen, and neighbors who became the first defenders of their town. It captures the spirit of the Minuteman, ordinary people prepared to risk everything when their rights and community were threatened. Just steps from the Green stands Buckman Tavern, the place where many militia waited in the early hours before the British arrived. Inside these walls, men paced, loaded their muskets, shared rumors, and tried to steady their nerves. When the alarm finally came, they stepped out from this doorway and walked toward the Green, unsure of what the morning would become. This is the Hancock Clark House, where John Hancock and Samuel Adams spent the night of April 18th. It was here that Paul Revere and William Dawes arrived after their midnight ride, warning that the British regulars were marching toward Lexington and Concord. In these rooms, candlelight flickered over maps and letters as the news sank in. The British weren't on a routine patrol. They were heading directly toward them. The alarm spread quickly, rousing the militia and setting the countryside in motion. Along this quiet stretch of road, Paul Revere's midnight ride came to an abrupt stop. After warning Hancock and Adams, he continued toward Concord, but the British patrols were sweeping the countryside. Here, Revere was surrounded, questioned, and detained. He never reached Concord that night, but his mission had already succeeded. The alarm was spreading through dozens of other riders. This place reminds us that the revolution wasn't ignited by one man, but by an entire network of citizens ready to act. As you walk toward the Old North Bridge, you're following the same path colonial militia took that morning. By the time they reached this rise, hundreds of men from Concord and nearby towns had gathered, watching smoke drift from the town center and fearing the worst. These weren't trained soldiers. They were farmers and tradesmen, but as they moved closer to the river, they understood that the choices made here would echo far beyond Concord. Every step forward carried them deeper into a moment that would reshape history. This is the Old North Bridge, the site of the famous shot heard round the world. Here, colonial militia faced British regulars in an open resistance for the first time. The British fired first and the militia fired back. In that exchange, everything changed. This bridge stands as a declaration that these people were willing to stand together, defend their rights, and shape the destiny of a new nation. This statue honors the citizen soldiers who answered the alarm on April 19th. It captures the moment an ordinary man left his plow, took up his musket, and stepped into history, a symbol of every militia member who defended his home. Miriam's Corner marks one of the most decisive moments of April 19, 1775. After the fight at North Bridge, the British regulars began their long march back to Boston. Here, at this narrow bend in the road, colonial militias were waiting, men from Reading, Billerica, Bedford, and countless nearby towns who had answered the alarm and moved with precision and purpose. The terrain worked against the British. Fences, stone walls, and cover along the roadside, allowed colonists to gather in growing numbers. As the retreating column passed this point, the tension finally erupted. Gunfire broke out, sharp and sudden, and the running battle truly began. From here all the way along the battle road, the British faced a relentless, coordinated resistance. Proof that what happened that day wasn't a single skirmish, but the rising of an entire region determined to defend its rights, its towns, and its future. As you walk the Battle Road Trail, you're moving along the very route the British regulars took as they began their long and punishing retreat back to Boston. What looks peaceful now was once a gauntlet. Miles of wooded curves, farm lanes, and stone walls where colonial militia gathered in greater and greater numbers. From every bend in the road, men appeared with muskets ready, firing from behind trees, barns, and fence lines. The British column, stretched thin and exhausted, pushed forward under constant attack. Hartwell Tavern sat directly along the route of the British retreat. As the regulars marched past, colonial militia closed in from the fields and woods around it, firing from behind stone walls and barns. This ordinary roadside tavern became part of an extraordinary moment, a reminder that the Revolutionary War wasn't fought on distant battlefields, but in the yards, homes, and everyday places of the people who lived here. As you walk deeper along this stretch of the battle road, the landscape begins to tell its own story. It's quieter here, and easy to imagine how the British column must have felt as they pushed forward, tired, hungry, and now surrounded by men who knew every hill and hollow. Militia companies from dozens of towns had arrived by this point, moving ahead of the British, gathering behind stone walls, and firing from sheltered ridges. Up ahead stand the surviving studs of a colonial home, the remains of a family's life in 1775. Houses like this lined the road, and many became cover for the militia as the battle grew fiercer. These ruins remind us of the ordinary people whose land, property, and daily routines were caught in the storm of that day. Today, Minuteman National Historical Park protects these landscapes and stories so we can walk them ourselves. From Lexington Green to Concord's Fields, this place honors the people who risked everything. As the day quiets again, we're reminded that history wasn't made by distant heroes, but by everyday people standing up for the future they believed in.